They'll start up on the top, they kind of swoop down to the middle, and then they come back down. So it's kind of either a Z or an F. The main point is they kind of start at a certain point on the screen, and then they kind of go down. So you got to think about that when you're developing the content on your screen, because they're used to looking at it a certain way. You don't want to get so clever that they can't find the content, or if they're not looking where you want them to look initially. And there are things, though, that you can do, and I kind of created this slide to represent some of that. So using the numbers, it's a big visual cue, right? It's something I've designed, yet you know, even though I violated what would be a normal way for you to look at the content on the screen, the fact that I use those numbers, you know where you need to go to start. At least most of you do. Or you would start most likely at 1, and then 2, and then 3, right? And the same thing with the arrow. The fact that I have an arrow on there and it's going a certain direction, it implies that the content's moving a certain way, or the information's going that way. So it already directs your eye through the screen a different way. So when you're building your content, there's really nothing on your screen that should be there by accident. Everything on that screen is something you've placed on it. It's not like you went up to go to the bathroom, you came back, all of a sudden there's this clip art on your screen. Somebody's playing a joke on you, and just have all sorts of clip art. So everything that's on that screen is something you've placed on there. It all really should contribute to the meaning of the content that you've got on there, because the graphics and how you structure those elements on the screen say as much about the course and the course content as the actual text and the audio. So we'll look at a couple of these. So basic design, my wife doesn't like this, so I'll use CART when I'm talking, but you know, a lot of you probably heard this. A good book, if you don't know anything about graphic design, Robin Williams, it's a non-designer's design book. It's a little dated because it's structured more around like e-learning and print, or not e-learning, web design and print. But the concepts, those core concepts are good. She's got a lot of good before and after examples. So once you get some of the concepts, you'll understand enough to kind of to get going. And then there's plenty of stuff. If you look up this on the internet, you'll find, probably, 200 or 300 really good resources and examples, especially from some of the graphic design blogs. But that contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, those are some basic concepts when you start talking about working with elements on your screen. So we'll look at a couple of examples of how that works. So these are just some simple examples. So you've got contrast. When you look at the blue squares, what do you focus on? Right, so you see the big ones. So the size, the difference, the shape, the colors. You probably can't, I guess the color work okay. And then even with fonts. So there are things you can do. If I didn't have any text on there and I just had those blue squares, you might not know what it's about. But at some point you do know that because of that contrast, that there's some distinction between that one big square and the other ones. So that's kind of what contrast does. So you notice those things that are different. It's a great way to draw attention to content on your screen. Same thing with repetition. So bullet points, and I just kind of line up some simple stuff to screen grab of this page online. You can see some repetitive elements up here. You've got the numbering, the color scheming, the way they're lined up. And those things, again, all kind of contribute to meaning. In this sense, you notice what's the same, and there's a relationship that's implied because of the way the content's structured on the screen. And then here, the alignment. Again, how you align things on the screen. I think this was from the non-designer's book, but you can kind of see this is a business card, and it's kind of reworked. And again, it's easier to kind of pick up information. Here, you're not quite sure what you're supposed to be looking at. And so how you align content on the screen is really going to contribute to the meaning of the content. And then proximity. If you look at that first group of squares there, you don't even know what the relationship is, right? But you can look at these, even if I didn't have any text on there, there's already an implied relationship without me saying anything. So again, how you structure the content on the screen really can help contribute to the information that you want to share. It supports the learning process. Here's an example. Did anybody send me a slide that looked like this? Okay, I reworked it, but this was an interesting one. Somebody had sent me this course, and it looked a little different than this. I had masked it. But the thing was, I went through the course, and I was kind of going through it. Is it 8 o'clock? Okay. So I was going through this and clicking through this person's course, and I was about 10 slides into it, and I kind of lost what I was doing, because when I had gotten to this slide, which was earlier in the flow, I thought that there was a hierarchy, because the way the person designed it actually looked more like a pyramid. So I thought there was a relationship to the content based on kind of this pyramid structure. So I wasn't paying attention like a lot of eLearning or people who take eLearning courses. So I just clicked it through the slide, and somewhere through the process I thought, well, this doesn't make any sense. Because I had looked at this first slide and thought there was this relationship because of the way the slide was structured. Then when I got into the content later on, I was kind of confused how to go backwards. But what it turned out is the person who designed this slide, it kind of looked more like a pyramid in the real slide, and these different colors and all that stuff. And the reality is there was no relationship. It was just the same information. But that person just liked those colors, and the text, I actually used the same text, but some of the text, there was more text than others. So some of the shapes were different sizes than the others. So again, going through like proximity and the repetition and all that stuff, the way that content was structured was a little bit confusing. And especially if you structure like a pyramid, because a pyramid implies a certain type of hierarchy. So we just reworked these slides a couple of different ways to kind of show how, well, this is just basic information. There are things you can do just applying some of those graphic design principles. So here's the same content, but now you can quickly, we're using some contrast. We still use the colors, even though the colors didn't mean anything, but in a real course, the colors might represent a different section or topic or something. But you can see, you can quickly get the gist of what it is. And because of the alignment of it, you can see that they're equal levels and not, there's not a hierarchy. And the same thing here, again, it's a simple reworking, but again, the structure of it, you have a better understanding of what it is. This is actually a good example of how contrast would work better, because if we made those section titles bolder, those would stand out a lot more. Right now, they're just bold, and it's kind of hard to distinguish them when you quickly glance through it. Here's one, if you want to kind of humanize it, again, just throwing a background image on there and reworking it. And then that was it. So I had another one, but I took it out. So let's go, that's kind of the basic graphic design stuff. Now let's think about kind of that immersive part of it and creating a course that looks or feels like it belongs to your content. So let's talk about a Western movie poster. If you were going to design a Western movie poster, what would it look like? Big text title, Dusty, cactus, horses, cowboy hats, lassos. Is that what you said? Okay, lasso border. You got that serify Western font, tumbleweed, right? But guess what? I did a search for Western movie posters, and they all kind of have a Western look, right? So there's a part of you, we call it the visual voice, right? When I read a book, there's kind of a voice that talks to you, or maybe it's just me, but you have that voice, right? Some of you might not have that, but I do. And then there's that visual voice that when you think Western movie poster, you might not be a graphic artist, but you mentally put yourself in that environment. You can think. Like if I thought, okay, we're going to design an e-learning course for operating room technology, and you're going to be in an operating room, you can already start to think about, people in these medical scrubs and the masks and maybe a sterile type environment. You kind of already have a mental picture of what that course is going to look like. So when you're designing your course, you can actually bring the learners into the course a lot better if you can create an environment that kind of works with the content. So here's a quick demo. Normally in the sessions we do this as a kind of an exercise, but we'll just kind of do this quickly in here. This is just a simple PowerPoint slide I had David, who works for me, put it together. It's funny because he didn't know what the Hoh rainforest was, and you'll see that later in this flow chart. But the idea was like, what if we were doing a course on the Hoh rainforest, and so we've got these trees, and then this is kind of our starting point, and then these would be the sections that you would go through. So this is kind of your starting point, and then just doing a few simple things, you can kind of create something like this. Again, this is simple, but it's got much more immersive. It kind of brings you into the rainforest. So let's talk about how we did that. The cool thing is, and you'll see this at one of the links, the link I gave you at the beginning, and then I'll